9. The scarcity of attention. When information became cheap and focus became everything. The prediction, what we thought. As the internet expanded in the 1990s, a counterintuitive idea emerged. Information would stop being scarce and attention would take its place. In a world where anyone could publish and everything could be accessed, the limiting factor would no longer be data or distribution. It would be human focus. Time, concentration, and awareness would become the most valuable resources. Economies, cultures, and institutions would reorganize around capturing and holding attention, because without attention, information meant nothing. This prediction reframed the digital future in psychological rather than technical terms. The internet wouldn't just connect people, it would compete for them. Success would belong not to those who produced the most content, but to those who could command the most attention, consistently, emotionally, and at scale. Standing in 1999, this sounded insightful, even provocative, but it did not yet feel urgent. Information overload was a concept. Attention scarcity was a theory. The lived experience had not yet arrived. Why this prediction made sense in 1999? To understand why the attention economy felt plausible, but still abstract, at the end of the 20th century, we need to reconstruct what abundance actually looked like back then. In 1999, information was increasing, but it was not yet overwhelming. People still consumed news in bounded doses. A morning paper, an evening broadcast, perhaps a few websites checked deliberately. Email inboxes were manageable. Notifications did not exist. The internet required effort and intention. You logged on, did what you needed, and logged off. And yet the direction of change was obvious. Websites were multiplying. Content was growing faster than any individual could consume it. Publishing costs were collapsing. The barriers that once filtered information, editors, broadcasters, shelf space, were dissolving. Anyone could post. Everything could circulate. From that vantage point, it didn't take much imagination to see the next bottleneck forming. If information was no longer scarce, something else had to be. And the most obvious candidate was attention. This insight also aligned with the broader optimism of the era. The late 1990s carried a belief that markets would naturally reallocate value to what mattered most. If information became abundant, attention would become precious, and systems would adapt accordingly. What people underestimated was how aggressively that adaptation would occur, who said it, and where. One of the clearest early articulations of this idea came from Michael Goldhaber in a 1997 essay published in Wired. Goldhaber argued that the emerging digital economy would not be driven primarily by money or information, but by attention. In a world where content could be replicated infinitely, value would shift toward visibility, recognition, and engagement. Individuals and institutions would compete not just for customers, but for awareness. At the time, this was a subtle argument. Goldhaber wasn't predicting addiction or outrage cycles. He wasn't warning about manipulation or algorithmic amplification. He was making a structural claim. Economics follows scarcity, and attention was becoming scarce. In the late 1990s, Wired served as a forum for exactly this kind of forward-looking thinking. Its readership included technologists, entrepreneurs, policymakers, and cultural critics, people positioned to shape how the internet would actually develop. Goldhaber's idea circulated quietly, but it lodged itself in the conceptual foundations of the digital age. What actually happened 2000 to 2025? The attention economy did not just emerge. It dominated. As the 2000s unfolded, content production exploded. Blogs, forums, and early social platforms multiplied. Search engines organized the chaos. Advertising followed clicks. Metrics replaced intuition. Attention became measurable. Then came acceleration. Social media platforms refined a business model, offer free services, capture attention, sell it to advertisers. Feeds replaced homepages. Notifications replaced visits. Algorithms learned what kept users engaged and delivered more of it. By the 2010s, attention had become the central currency of the internet. Entire industries were built around maximizing engagement. Success was measured in views, likes, shares, watch time, and retention. Content optimized itself for emotional response, especially surprise, anger, and validation. By the early 2020s, the consequences were impossible to ignore. Attention scarcity reshaped media economics, political discourse, mental health, cultural norms, workplace expectations. Being seen mattered as much as being right. Being viral mattered more than being accurate. The competition for attention intensified to the point where silence itself felt risky. By 2025, attention was no longer just an economic resource. It was a psychological battleground. The prediction that attention would become scarce turned out to be not only accurate, but incomplete. Attention didn't just become valuable, it became contested, monetized, and engineered. Verdict. Status. Realized. The attention economy is now a defining feature of digital life. Platforms, media, politics, and culture all compete for limited human focus. Attention is measured, traded, optimized, and exhausted. What was once a theoretical insight became the operating system of the internet. Why it played out this way? This prediction succeeded because it identified a fundamental constraint that technology could not eliminate. Information scales easily. Attention does not. Human cognitive capacity is limited. Time is finite. Emotional energy is bounded. As content multiplied, competition for these scarce resources intensified. Technology did not resolve this tension, it amplified it. Crucially, incentives aligned around attention extraction. Advertising rewarded engagement. Platforms rewarded retention. Creators optimized for visibility. Algorithms optimized for whatever kept users from leaving. What Goldhaber did not, and perhaps could not, fully anticipate was how precisely attention could be measured and manipulated once data and machine learning entered the picture. The scarcity he identified became a lever. The result was not merely competition for attention, but industrialized attention capture. What this prediction teaches us about the future. This case highlights a recurring lesson in forecasting. When predictions shift focus from technology to human limits, they tend to be especially durable. Attention was not a passing constraint. It was a permanent one that the digital age exposed and exploited. The prediction endured because it rested on psychology, not hardware. It also reveals a blind spot of millennium-era optimism. In 1999, attention scarcity sounded like a neutral market adjustment. Few imagined it would shape identity, mental health, and democratic processes so profoundly. The future delivered the prediction, but attached consequences that were not part of the original hope. One sentence takeaway. When information became limitless, attention became the most valuable and contested resource of the digital age.